There are metaphors, in Kabbalah, the rose bush, right? So letting a rose bush grow is the chesed, trimming it is gevura, and the balance is that beauty of tiferes. Enough nutrients are in the bush after you kill it. Paradoxically, you have to kill it to make it survive. You have to cut it to let it live. So, it's kind of the same thing with us. We need to be validated to be ourselves. My mother always said, be yourself. But we also need to do some pushing to change, to exercise, to improve our behavior. But when that is too much, you're killing the rose bush. You're squeezing the bunny rabbit, so to speak. And that is too harsh. That's why you have gevura sheba gevura in the Sefirot. Even gevura needs gevura. It's not gevura squared. Even rules and harshness need to be pulled back.
Welcome back, my dear friends, to another episode of Beyond the Book podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Wogelington. I'm here today with a rockin' awesome guest who a friend of mine, a friend of my family's, a friend of my brother's, and his thoughts have been in my world for a long time. It has been in part of my thought processes for many years. And his name is Rabbi Ian Bailey. We'll talk about his book. We'll probably touch on his podcast and where you can find that, and some of the awesome work and stuff that he's been doing. His book is called his wonderful book is called The 7 Ways, and it's a personality system based on the Sefirot. And I feel like I've limited it to so much. It's really a way of thinking, a way of looking at a life and the Torah and the amazing personalities that we are given to understand in the Torah. That's why I think this book was for me. It really opened up a way of thinking, learning the Torah, reading the Torah, and applying it to my life. So welcome, Rabbi Bailey, to the show.
That's great to be here. I'm happy to be on your podcast. Very excited.
All right. So let's give the listeners like a little bit of background, like who are you, Rabbi Bailey? Where you come from? Where do you and where did you build this system? Where did you get to writing this book and some of that journey? So,
absolutely. Well, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, which is a hotbed of psychology in the 80s and 90s. Things that are commonplace today were pretty popular back then, and I've always been interested in psychology and becoming a mental health therapist. My mother always spoke to me about psychological ideas. She was a very intuitive person, Allah Shalom. And I was always interested in birth order psychology. What does it mean? Firstborn, middleborn. How does that orient a person? But as I started to be...
Where were you? You were firstborn, middleborn?
I'm only child.
Only child, right.
Sure.
Maybe that's why that interests you.
Definitely, yeah.
I'm in the middle of 7.
There you go. There you go. So I grew up with a stepsister some of the time, but I've always been kind of peering at the world from afar. My mother was disabled and stay-at-home mom, and parents divorced, so I was involved with them. But I'm always trying to figure out the world. My mom said I was born looking at the world, trying to figure it out. So, as I was always curious and studying psychology, and I always found that the Torah has incredible sources for highly, highly accurate psychology. Things that took centuries for people to discover have always been in Mishlei and different Agados and the Gemara, straight from the Chumash. And as I studied in yeshiva, I learned about the Sefirot from a very practical, technical kind of standpoint, that they're sort of the building blocks for everything. So it happens to be I love therapy and psychology and things, but they're building blocks for science and math and technology. They're just patterns of how the world is built. The 7 lower Sefirot, the 4 upper, 3 at any given time. So as I started learning that, everything came together in my mind. So wait a minute, I see in people these patterns. I see in therapeutic practices these patterns. I see in Midrash and Agada these patterns. We can juice that. We can generate philosophy and advice and therapy advice based on these particular patterns.
And how did you get into the Sefirot specifically?
Sure, I was learning in a yeshiva Derech Eitz Chaim, and they sort of had this Masorah from their Rebbeim that they would look at the Parsha and the Shiva Roim, what we call the Ushpizin, and describing Avraham Avinu, Chesed, Yitzchak is Gevura, and Yaakov is Tiferes. And I started seeing this within people. Let's say Yaakov is Tiferes. At least his actions reflect someone who's doing something nitty-gritty, that's the klal shebaprat, that's reflective of something much bigger, which gives forth to within the bria that there's metaphor, that there's something that's called dreams, that there's more of a right brain, quote-unquote, thinking out of a metaphor, where he's just Yitzchak Avinu, a high-level person who's mastering the imitation of what Abraham is doing. There are certain people who do well better imitating systems of other people that are out there. And I notice certain people are more intense, certain people are more creative, certain people have a faculty of memory like Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a certain midah. And I want to make this very clear. When I'm not saying people might have a Netzach personality, it's really, a midah is an attribute, it's a skill set. There are many layers to the personality. There's the skill set people have, a specialty, birth order, experiences that a person has had, the culture they come from. And I think all of them do have flavors within the 7 and the 11 Sefirot, even cultures like Rav Dessler talks about. But every person really is unique. I don't mean that in a cliche kind of way. But it helps us to understand ourselves through certain patterns and methodologies, so we are pursuing things that are more relevant to our being, for fulfillment, communicating better with the partner. You know, I matched them up. Now that I'm in mental health as a therapist, there really are different methods of therapy, and I believe you can match it up with someone's personality. Creative person towards art therapy or dramatic arts therapy. That is a metaphor that they get, whereas pure talk therapy, rehashing the past, might make might make an emotional person feel better. A creative person might be poison for them. And when you recognize that and you teach them to live in the moment and to look at the positive side of life, that is their medicine. That's medicinal for them. So it's very tailored advice for people.
And you'll constantly be having to come up with new ones because everybody's set of, cultures and midos and things are all unique.
Exactly. Then you have thousands upon thousands of permutations of this. And then certain people are not ready. To take the Tiferes example, certain people are not ready to hear, go do some art. You'll feel better if you do some art. So I spend a lot of time, why are people stuck? And usually people are stuck, quote unquote, not growing because of a family situation, the family systems. That's my training as a marriage and family therapist. Certain people are stuck because they have self-criticism. We all have this midos inside of us. And as I spoke about in my Sefirot Omer podcast, which we'll speak about the podcast, but the 49 permutations, there's a chesed and gevurah in all of us. We need to feel validated. Chesed, just existing, just being. And there's also gevurah we do. We can push ourselves to eat healthier and exercise, but if we're too critical of ourselves, that can also paralyze us. So I deal with a lot of self-criticism. I even argue that more people are, I think, in bed or on the couch not doing something out of self-criticism than laziness. And we think we're lazy. We think other people are lazy. It's really this voice inside of them, or multiple voices inside of them, that relate to being too hard on ourselves. And even in the book that talks about, in the website that talks about self-criticism, internal family systems, 7 internal critics, matching up with the 7 Sefirot again. It's just everywhere. You can't throw a rock in psychology without hitting 5, 6, and 7 and fill in the gap of the 5 and 6 up to 7 with the Sefirot. Oh,
that's amazing. That's a good point. But can we unpack it for a second? What do you mean self-criticism? That people sit on the couch and they're, rather than laziness, they're being self-critical. So
sure. If someone says themselves, if someone is not acting, not doing something, they say to themselves, I should be exercising, I should be cleaning the house. Very often, internal family systems, which I believe is, Torah psychology, internal Sefirot that we have, voices inside. One might have a perfectionist voice inside that says, I have to do this perfectly. I need to clean the house perfectly, and plan it out. And if they don't plan it out and do it perfectly, they do nothing. Whereas someone else who has a balanced inner motivation would say, I need to do a good job, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So that is a type of way that it is a useful inner voice. There's an inner critic taskmaster, inner critic, and I'll explain what they are. Taskmaster, there's inner critic of rehashing the past called, I have to pull out, you can edit this out. The guilt tripper and the perfectionist. You could look
anything up if you need.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I should. I will. So, let's say, we learn from our experiences in the past. The best thing is to take the lesson, forget about what happened. If we obsess over what happened, we're never going to get over it. But someone might feel depressed or paralyzed from acting if they're rehashing the past ad nauseum. So creative people do much better when they're living in the moment. They have a process whereby they absorb the world, incubate, and create. The creative process. If what they're doing is they are obsessed over the bad things they did in the past, they're kind of doing too much gevur to themselves, too much heaviness and self-criticism. They are not being balanced with what they're doing. Tiferes is a balance of chesed and gevura, substance and form, broadness and tightness. So if someone is thinking about the past too much, what they did, that will paralyze them when they're actually someone with plenty of energy. Someone says, I have to do it perfectly. Many only children, oldest children, Netzach personality, gevur personality. It could be anybody. Many people have tendency to have perfectionism. Some people have a taskmaster. I must do it. And they're so serious about it. Paradoxically, they do nothing. So the advice in the book is to have an inner moderator that we create that speaks to those inner critics to ease it back. I have to tell people to have this moderator. I can't do this for themselves, like trauma therapy. Person has to create the inner moderator. They make an image or a voice to speak to the critics. I just have to do a good job. Doesn't have to be perfect. So within people who are not acting is this internal voice of perfection. And many people are both creative and Netzach analytic, creative and gevura intense. And that creates this contradiction. Should I be spontaneous? Should I be harsh on myself? So when we see a child that we have, a student in the class, we have to give pause for why they're not doing something. Listen to their voice. Do they feel like doing something in a fun way? Do they feel like they're being too hard on themselves? And try to flesh it out for them. Get behind the action. That's sort of what I mean by paralyzed.
Right. By the inner critic.
The inner critic, yeah. And I believe it's a chelik fun gevura. I believe that we can go to the Torah and the Midrashim and all that and have a better, even more tahor version of this internal family systems parts. But sometimes the psychology fleshes it out. The Ramban says everything is in the Torah if you can find it. But
so where do you see this concept of like the inner critic in the Torah? And it could be the broad.
I'll be totally honest. Right now, it's the broad idea of self-perfection because Yitzhak was a total korban, perfect. What I believe the understanding of Ur is he totally was preoccupied with doing what Abraham did. When you have a company that does well, don't change a thing. Keep that. That was his perfection. I still want to have time to flesh out Mishlei and Midrashim and all that because it's sort of a new thing in the past 12 months. I'll be intellectually honest, but the general idea does match up with that. Whereas Chesed is kind of just being. There are metaphors. In Kabbalah, the rose bush, right? So letting a rose bush grow is the Chesed. Trimming it is Gevura, and the balance is that beauty of Tiferes. Enough nutrients are in the bush after you kill it. Paradoxically, you have to kill it to make it survive. You have to cut it to let it live. So, it's kind of the same thing with us. We need to be validated to be ourselves. My mother said, be yourself. But we also need to do some pushing to change, to exercise, to improve our behavior. But when that is too much, you're killing the rose bush. You're squeezing the bunny rabbit, so to speak. And that is too harsh. That's why you have Gevura Sheba Gevura in the Sefirot. Even Gevura needs Gevura. It's not Gevura squared. Even rules and harshness need to be pulled back.
Even rules and harshness need to be...
Even rules need rules.
Right.
Even harshness needs to be harshness towards the harshness, which means cancel it out, make it more lenient.
Right. Like that, yeah. That's a good point. All right, before we go further on this, can you give just a... I know this is the way you talk, and the Sefirot are like in your head.
My lexicon, my vernacular.
This is the way, and I'm following you, but let's give
a quick and dirty explanation of everything.
Yeah, just and not necessarily permutation, just like the easy 7. So
sure, I'm gonna do it in the opposite order for once because Chesed is the hardest one to get. But once you get that, you'll get everything. Okay, no, let's do it in the right order. Let's do it straight. Okay, the problem is that we hear the word Chesed, and it's so related to loving kindness and giving that it's hard for us to pull our minds out of that. But it relates to that as well. But it's much broader than that, pun intended. So in Kabbalah, Chesed is the klal. It is an all-inclusive version of everything. You are not judging. You are not saying something should not be there. You are not criticizing. You are letting something just be and exist. In contradistinction, Gevura is the fact that there's a prat. Such a thing exists in the world that you have to zero in on one point in time in order to validate that one point in time. So Chesed is kindness because you're not judging the person that you're giving. You're purely giving to him. This is the whole thing with Yishmael. Yishmael we know he's going to be wicked one day. Should we should we let him die? No, right now he's a human. Humanistic giving is not judging. That's why it's related, okay? But it really is, that's only one chelik of chesed. Chesed is just letting something be extremely broad and to be. And Gevura is one prat and point in time. And I'll circle back to that. But Tiferes is the klal shebaprat. Where do you find a full klal, a full broadness within a detail? This is the chap. Klal shebaprat is, what is a snow globe? It is a little piece of plastic and water that captures an entire city. San Francisco snow globe, New York snow. What does that mean? It's just a piece of plastic. What are you talking about? So there's a piece in creation that has to do with metaphor and things being broader than they are. So when Yaakov Avinu comes along, he says, well, Abraham had these big topics. Yitzhak was a man of details. I'm going to infuse the two. I'm going to say Judaism has, I will reveal that Kadosh Baruch Hu has Judaism where you do nitty-gritty actions, but they have spiritual consequences. I'm going to fight somebody on this earth, but he's a malach in Shemayim, and it has an impact. It's a connection between the two. Okay? So Abraham has a very extensive, complex life. But, what he was doing is it's coming and saying that I've done all my deductive logic. There is a creator in this world, and it's all inclusive of everything. I should give to you because we're all the same kind. We're all the same thing. We're all a thought in Hakadosh Baruch Hu's head, whatever philosophy you subscribe to. Kindness. We're of the same kind. I'm just going to give to you. And Yitzchak says, well, we're only going to do giving that makes sense. And Abraham, even at the end of his life, is only having a hotel. He's not running around the world. He has a little progression there through the Sefirot. See this Sefirot podcast, or we'll talk about that. So it's a little complicated to get into Abraham and Yitzchak, but just the definition is chesed is unmolded. Someone with a midah of chesed in their personality. It's the hardest one to figure out, but you see it intuitively in some literature and personality types. It's someone who doesn't feel they have a skill set, but they have to practice and mold the skill set. I always talk about LeBron James versus Michael Jordan. Maybe people can appreciate this. It's not too much of the non-kosher world or whatever. Michael Jordan was cut from the team. He grew, and his personality is to harness that anger and have a chip on his shoulder, constant competition. He would bet people in the night. He got in trouble for betting. He would nonstop try to beat you. LeBron James is someone who did not hit those game winners at the beginning of his career. He's a freak athlete, but he took a lot of time in order to practice what he did, and he always got better. And then he gradually dominated at what he was. One of his greatest skills is spatial recognition. You have to find some of these videos. He's able to recall almost every game he's ever been in, what people were doing throughout the game.
Sure, they once asked him, can you recount the last 2 minutes of the game? And he went through the 2 minutes.
That's right.
Well, he passed it here, and then he took it, and I inbounded, and I threw it back, and I did this. And he just said back the last 2 minutes of the game. Exactly. And it was crazy what he remembered.
That's right. And he did it from this year and from 2 years ago. Whereas Jordan would reference what he saw from his perspective. That's malchus, okay? That's the total ego of myself. We'll get into that. So, when I talk about people having chesed, it's not that they're super emotional about giving. They would give because it's a human thing to give.
So wait, so you would say
we had a machalik between chesed and hod.
So the Michael Jordan mentality is the
malchus mentality.
Malchus mentality and LeBron James mentality.
I think it's the chesed mentality because that's from his personality. Right. And you see Michael Jordan, he has Tiferes also. You see him when he's not competing, he's got an artist hat on, he's talking, he's laughing, he's doing documentaries, he's talking about this kind of thing. He loves the artistry of the dunk and moving his body and everything. Whereas LeBron James, he's like, he gets a calf cramp. He's very physical. He gets a calf cramp and he has to go sit down, because chesed is very physical. It's part of kinesthetic. I feel it in my body. It's my being. Lehis bonain, bina, maven davar mitoch davar. I'm focusing on the physical things. Hod. Now this is machalik here. Hod and chesed are the bina midos. I believe that the lower spheros are building blocks of the upper spheros, and bina, intuition, or the physical wisdom. Maven davar mitoch davar. What is there? What is deeper inside of that? So Hod is, I believe that the prat can be distinct from the klal. People are unique. I'm going to nurture people. I feel a certain empathy towards individuals. I want to make sure the individual is nurtured and is given to. That is the hod there. It's a physical feeling. It's a support. Chesed is, I feel that in my body. People with chesed, they feel things in their body and they have to mold themselves over time. The problem is they feel insignificant. I hear this in therapy. I don't know what to do. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. So pick something, that's sort of Shakti, usually a secondary Midah. We'll talk about that. Usually there's something about them. Stick with it and go with it, and they can become a master of that. But they don't feel as distinct. Gevura is more about distinction, whereas Gevura in a person...
So that's Hod. A Hod would hit that wall of a jack of all trades.
The Hod would feel insignificant, but they would do something helping. They would be inclined towards nursing, therapist, and again, they could be a salesman of insurance salesman, but they're going to want to talk to the family about their feelings and help them afterwards and talk about their lives and things like that. But what we call chesed is probably something like a Hod in the Sefirot lexicon. It's the emotional giving, it's loving kindness. Really, our chesed should also include chesed, which is humanistic giving, even if you don't feel like it. It's like walking by a room in a hospital. I feel bad for that patient. I'm a human, they're a human. Hod is the nurse. Netzach is the doctor. Netzach is the intellectual knowledge and information, more like a doctor. In the Klal and Prat lexicon, it relates to every Prat has to fit into the Klal. So, is your idea kosher? A lot of Rabbanim have this, Dayanim, because they have that faculty of memory, but they're also like, let's make sure information fits in the perfect realm of ideas. Now, the world we live in is not Beis Shammai, it's Beis Hillel. So Beis Shammai is trying to have this world where it has to be so ideal and perfect. That's the Yemos HaMashiach. That's in the future. It's a little harsh. They have a self-critic, a lot of them, and they want to be critical on us. But the whole Aharon, right, balances the Moshe Rabbeinu out, where you have the rabbi and the assistant rabbi. You have the rabbi who's knowledgeable and the one that's people-oriented, when both of them should do it, of course, balance themselves out. So chesed, the klal, everything should be. Gevura, things have to be defined. Tiferes, there's a beautiful blending of the two. Unique sphere by itself. Netzach, the prat has to exist in the klal. Every detail has to make sense. Oker harm, I'm grinding up the knowledge. I'm analyzing the knowledge. I remember facts. Less about people and feelings, more about facts. Aharon, more about empathy, because each prat can exist without the klal. Those are all the people running around in the arena. And the two spheros that deal with sort of the leadership aspects, the more meta, is Yesod and Malchus. So Yesod is the method of bringing all the pratim together. So Yosef is preoccupied with, wow, our sheep business is not doing well. We have discord in the family. Let's bring it together now. Brothers are not ready for that. They would rather wait till they feel that need for help. So
there wasn't two Midos at play there, right?
Yeah.
There was
multiple Midos, yeah.
Okay.
And in fact,
nobody else had Yesod?
I think that one could be Chesed Yesod. Let me pull up my chart, because I talk about this in the first introduction to my Shvatim podcast.
Oh.
I believe if you have all of the brothers and then Yosef in the Mishkan, that represents all the permutations of the Sfiros. But Chesed, it has all 7 Chesed permutations, and then just one of Gevura through Malchus. And the reason is, people who have the 7 different Chesed Midos, they really do present as almost like a different personality. Chesed Gevura through Chesed Malchus, it's almost like a half brother. I call it later Chesed. It's later in the order.
Or is Chesed's allowing those other ones to live?
It's allowing them to live, and as you go in that order, they get more and more Gevura-like, more intense, more they get stronger, more into being having self-control and pushing themselves in work and business. I believe it's Machane. Let's see. Netzach. I believe it's Naphtali. Let me see here. Map of Machane. So Chesed Yesod, I have a Zevulun. Okay, think about it. Zevulun and Yisachar have a partnership. Yisachar, I have his Chesed Netzach. And again, he might not have been the Chesed Netzach personality, and he might have been wielding pure Netzach, but he's one of the B'nai Shvachos. He's one of the, considered they're all Shiftei Ka, they're all holy tribes, but considered somewhat of not being Malchus and the mainstream first few brothers. And as a middle child, there's something about the Bechor, But when it comes to so Naphtali is there on the Yam. He's an incredible businessman. He has the boats out there. He's across from the Tzidonim in Tzur. He's across from these incredibly malchus, aggressive, financially successful people across there. The Achav comes from there, and they are, when the Jewish people don't finish the job in Shoftim, they don't completely conquer the land. It makes sense. These malchus this very strong malchus nation is still up above on top. So you have, I do believe Zevulun has Chesed Yisod up there, but being a Ben HaShifcha, reading the room, he chose not to bring all the Sefirot Midos together. But at the right time, after Yosef learns his opposite Midah Gevura, he learns that self-control, he waits for his time, he's able to instantly be put in the right place to bring together the dungeon, bring together his master's home, bring together Mitzrayim as a catalyst.
Sure, even with the brothers, he's waiting. He's accessing that Gevura, right?
Well, I think it was a lack of Gevura when he told on him to the father.
Right, but then later in the story, we see
right.
He's waiting. He's setting up this whole story for them.
Yes,
it's the Gevura of his.
That's right.
Okay,
and he's doing Yesod Tiferes, which is orchestrating an enactment. He's showing them something and not telling them. In therapy, we do that. If I just tell a family something, it's different than getting them to talk and showing them what's going on. So maybe it's not recommended for everybody. It's kind of it's a very innovative thing, but I believe it was warranted at the time. So Yesod is the catalyst. Now we look at Malchus is very strong and amazing. There's Ein Melech B'li Am though. If without that Yesod, without Mashiach ben Yosef, without Yosef before Yehuda, without the bringing together of the nation before David HaMelech, there's no Malchus. However, Malchus is extremely strong. Malchus is all of the pratim are tightly together and working within that system. The Shari Ora, which is a wonderful book, it even predates Chassidus, so it's kind of this pure, original Sfiros work that you can learn with the beautiful commentary, the Beis Shar, talking about all the different Sfiros, names of Hashem. He writes that just as a crown is tight on the head, so too Malchus is all the pratim together are tight. So you have Malchus, and the subtext of it is Keser, okay? Just like Bina with Chesed and Hod, Chachma with Gevura and Netzach, and then Das with Yesod and Tiferes. We'll talk about that a little later. But Keser, the crown of Malchus is everything's together tightly. Now you sacrifice individuality and democracy. You have to, everything's filtered through the ego of that one man. So if that one man is unhealthy, then it's all these destructive kingdoms that we see that we hate. You're getting away from the British, becoming American and all that. But it's meant to be, David HaMelech is not a man. He is like a thesis. He's the executor of the will of the people meant to come together. And I do believe you have elements of it coming together in Eretz Yisrael. It's not there yet, obviously. There's problems there. But, you have there's a military part and there's a business part. So hopefully one day this will be eventually the Yemos HaMashiach through synthesizing the two, which is very difficult. Democracy and kingship, right. Business and military. So so that's like a pretty much a nice explanation, clear of sort of the Sfiros and the personalities that they they relate to, So certain people want to bring together companies, organizations, and consultants, or even just people that want to do that. And certain people are very strong personalities, and they can become president or CEOs, or they don't stop being strong usually, but they need to strike at the right time. Because even like Esnil ben Kenaz, I say in Shoftim, he came along. And he was a great Malchus leader from Yehuda. He was Kalev's brother, and he fought and he conquered. But they didn't have that grassroots movement to get rid of Avodah Zarah, to have a grassroots religious awakening, to go through all the Sfiros to get to Malchus. It lasted for 40 years, but it collapsed because of all the Avodah Zarah and all the people in the country who were making the Swiss cheese of Avodah Zarah and poor behavior. So that was a lesson that you have to then go through the Sfiros to get to the top. Another chesed could be the most important, you could say. What is the most important? They're all important. But it's a natural process that's within creation, and it's both secular and holy. It's nothing to do with like, oh, that's just a psychology book. No. The Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is describing a process that anything goes through, from purity to Matan Torah to how to build a building. And building individuals together, whereas the Bulls were about dominating. They want to humiliate people, make them feel a certain way. Jordan always trying to bend the rules and do loopholes, right? Whereas the Melech is supposed to stop the loopholes in the society. So it was healthy and unhealthy Malchus, but they were about using that Midah as a certain synergy to humiliate and dominate. And the Sonics were not able to defeat that because it's a lesser Midah. So you see it in game plans and things too.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see it in companies today and
Right.
big businesses, like when you deal with the big tech companies or anything, you see what their approach is to dominating markets, and
Right.
you could see that as well, the Middot at play, and you see that in your practice. So
Absolutely.
when it comes, what came first? And I know you mentioned this, but like obviously the infatuation with psychology and with seeing the world through that. But the practice came first, your therapy practice, or the Sefirot came first?
The Sefirot came first, and it's interesting because, and this is kind of a life lesson kind of deal, I always grew up with some anxiety based on kind of, divorced family, stress and all that. Thank God I got rid of that. But I felt like I didn't learn enough in school because kids misbehaving or my own inability to concentrate. I think it was Hashem's plan, because when I got to yeshiva, that really set my thinking. It was the Sefirot first, and I still wanted to help people. I knew about some personality things, but it wasn't until after that I got the root in the Shas and Sefirot and Midrash. And then I went to personality typing and saw that. And it was only when I went to, after I was a Rav, when I started my master's degree in marriage and family therapy, that I had a class in different forms of therapy, that I said, golly, this is also people Megala the Sefirot and the Bria, and we can make it better through the Torah. But these people were also Megala, and I guess what, it was based on their personality too. You have Carl Rogers, humanistic, right? He was super Hod man. He was a teacher and a farmer, very Hod and Tiferes. So he was all about humanistic therapy. Let's promote the individual, make you feel good. Once you feel better, you can think better. You have solution-focused therapy, very technical. What happened in the past that worked? Let's use it again. It's very Netzach, and this lady who's Netzach and her husband who's Tiferes Netzach invented it. She was a pharmacist in her past. That's how she thought, so she could Megala that kind of method within the Bria. And then you have the creative arts therapy with the Tiferes part of it. And Salvador Minuchin, who's Netzach Yesod. So as having the Midah of Yesod, he went from a doctor to a systems theorist. Look at the whole family, man. Don't look at the person as an individual. We are all heavily tied into the system we're in. Nested layers. Internal family, our immediate family, work, culture, and society. Nested layers of things impacting us. Why do you have one kid with ADHD symptoms in his family? He goes away to live with a different family. He doesn't have it. There's complex interaction between the child and the parent that also adds into that. Now, nowadays, we know there's some biological components to this, but in terms of, our environments, people were Megala, this little Yesod therapy. And going back, look in the prison, Yosef says, he sees their faces don't look good. He doesn't even use the same word. He says, why do your faces look so downtrodden today? Like he's even being Yesod Sheba, Hod Sheba Yesod, Yesod Hod. He's even laying some psychology on there. He's analyzing dreams. So I believe it's Novea from the Torah. But I was just awestruck that these people were using a sefira based on their sefira to help someone's sefira. I mean, it's unbelievable. So that's how I started thinking. It's even neurobiology. It's unbelievable. There's a man named Jacques Panksepp. I believe he's alive. He's a neuroscientist. He talks about emotional command systems within the body. Okay, what it means is, let's say you're afraid. Certain parts of your body will get together. Your hands and your blood will shoot down. Your body will get together to be afraid. It'll play. It'll care. Okay. Now he has 5 or 6. And it matches up with the Sefirot again. How do you get to Tiferes creativity? You play. In Making of a Gadol, I'm sure you love that book, huh? Yeah. Right? Very controversial. The Chazon Ish is splashing kids in the river. And then they say, why are you doing that, Rebbe? He said, you can't mechadesh Torah unless you know how to play and joke around. Because if all you're doing is left brain, what's already been done, you're never going to think of something new. If you can think out of the box, if you can ask a question, why is Yitzhak Gevura? He should be, Gabriel, right? When you see something out of whack, you judge it in court. When you see something out of whack in a midrash or in the world, you can discover something new over there. That's chiddush. So, when let's get some water here. Woo. So when you have the nefesh habahamus and you have the higher level human, and I had this email exchange with him, and if animals play, human beings do Tiferes creativity, but it's part of the same continuum. We have to go from people who are just enjoying ourselves and playing to innovation. Someone can be investigating. Many people who are tour guides have Netzach, because you're going out and you're looking around and there's facts and interest and stimulation from the world. Boom. He talks about exploring. He talks about rage. What is anger? Anger is unhealthy malchus. I'm the whole world. I deserve to have what I want, right? Oh, that's rage. Your body goes into rage mode. It's a command system in your body. That relates to malchus. Whereas Jim Collins talks about level 5 leadership. The best CEOs are people that are very driven. You could even say that they're angry, but they harness that energy to be strong, but also humble. That's why David Melech says, I'm going to beat you. We're going to beat you. And Hashem will help us. That's the humility along with the determination. That's healthy malchus. And we can all have that in our lives. I have a chip on my shoulder. I need to get over anxiety and be steady. You can do it. You can get over depression. That we learn from malchus. So even in biology, I believe that Akash Baruch Hu put those patterns in there, and we're meant. Now he didn't. I said, well, if somebody has more play, does that mean it matches up with creativity? He wouldn't agree to that, but I believe it makes a lot of sense. It's part of the same thinking method.
Right, you're taking he's saying sort of the Nefesh Bahamas theory, and you're taking it to the next step.
Yeah.
And he didn't agree with you.
He wasn't sure that you can match the two. Now, he's probably a very empirical scientist, and he wants to prove it, and I respect that. He doesn't want to answer some strange rabbi therapist guy in an email, but but it is possible that maybe your Nefesh Bahamas has more play, but you're meant to be macharesh through exploring. It's possible, something like that. But that would be something nice to explore. But hey, it's a kind of a scientific way to measure what the Sefirot say about harnessing our being.
Right. When you go back to that. Well, once we're talking about Nefesh Bahamas, sure. I'm really curious about this. On two fronts, and once we mentioned popular sports.
Oh yeah.
I need to get to the bottom of the UFC. I need to understand what puts them into the octagon. And I need to understand why in the world we or me watch it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So on both ends, whereas okay, they get into the octagon, and it's not boxing.
Right.
It's not. This is like a whole different deal. I don't know if you
many people can't watch it because they view it as gruesome, and they love professional wrestling when it's interesting, fake action or movies and things. So, yeah, what is it about that?
Yeah, it's funny for me, like that. The fake stuff doesn't speak to me, but
right,
I cringe during the UFC, but there's something very interesting, skilled. Yeah. It's more than interesting, skills. You're watching these guys locked on the floor. It's crazy. Why can't they just move? I could get up, and you're watching every move and and there's something really skilled about it. But I want to know what brings us to be able to watch that, and in terms of the personalities, Middot, like that. Yeah. That's sort of where and what gets them into the octagon. That's always my.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I'm thinking, and I think I may have an answer. Yitzhak Berkovitz, my Rabbi and your brother's Rabbi, he always talked about there's something called nitzchias, competition in the world. Now, let's get into gender here, okay? Because we talked about typological personality, and I believe everyone has 3 of those levels. I didn't mention that. Primary, secondary, tertiary, typological personality. So that your first one is your temperament, your character. So if someone is Netzach, they'll be more analytic and introverted. So secondary one is what you specialize in. So someone could be Netzach but specializing in Hod, helping, and they're still a therapist or a rabbi. And then the third one is any of these 7 that is kind of more hidden. So any of the 7 could be your first, second, and third, could be the same, could be different. Typological personality, we mentioned culture, we mentioned birth order, now gender, okay? So I believe, and this helps out with marriage. I mean, you can, if a guy has the right advice, your marriage could be cleaned up and all that. So I believe that innate in men, you have elevated chesed and netzach. So netzach is men have elevated testosterone, which means you have elevated analytic thinking, elevated physicality and strength, and even a certain amount of toughness. And it might not get activated until you have children and you get frustrated, but a certain amount of intolerance that you can have for better and for worse, not caring or saying enough of this baloney. Dads are like, enough, knock it off, malarkey. And then the chesed part is men have a certain amount, they are susceptible to being flooded in anxiety, especially with women's criticism, and a certain amount of physicality that they have, okay? And that matches up with women having, so chesed and netzach, right? Letting things be and analytic matches up with women's gevura and hod. So gevura, women, they're more preoccupied with issues in the home, safety in the home, the hunting versus gathering, making sure the home is doing well. Women could be a CEO and professional, but they're still bringing up problems more. John Gottman proved that in his research. and women have hod. So when they see somebody in trouble, they're more activated to help. Like in Russia, when all the salaries are low for doctors, women stepped in, or social workers. They're paid less, but they want to get in there. So just to be clear, so a man could be a hod man, but he still has the chesed and netzach. He could be helping as a profession, but in his marriage and in his personal life and parenting, he still needs to refine his analytic thinking and his steadiness, etc. So perhaps it's enjoyable to have the chesed and netzach stimulated. It's competition, it's physicality, it's someone losing but not dying, hopefully.
Sort
of, yeah. And then somebody who prefers Tiferes acting, movies and fake wrestling, or they have a hod and they feel bad for people. They can't watch Dr. Pimple Popper or whatever. They like it because they're anxious. Perhaps it stimulates a part, and that's why men like it more than women, but some women like it, Perhaps it's stimulating that chesed netzach part of men or even women to see competition. I want to see a victor. I want to see somebody win. And sometimes professional wrestling is more interesting than UFC because they have the baby faces and the heels, the good guy and bad guy. It's clearer. And in a movie, hey, here's a good guy. Oh, the bad guy wins, but the next movie, the good guy wins. So sometimes UFC lacks the villain and the good guy and who to identify with, but it's more true to the fight because it's real fighting. So I don't know, maybe it's sort of a chelik fun chesed and netzach and competition.
Right. Maybe also in order to get this, we have to do like a full pod on Fight Club. Like we got to get really.
Ooh, at the chazer that. I haven't seen that since the theater in the 90s.
Theater.
In the 90s, yeah.
I'm
dating myself a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, it's like there's so much in there about that we could do a Fight Club pod.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know, it's interesting, like why sometimes I'm drawn to watch it because I'm not a violent person.
Yeah.
It could be good competition, but it's just interesting to.
Well, it could be speaks to the fact that you want to be a tougher person and more assertive.
Could be.
If you're being hod and aharon and you're helping and you're aharon achicha yed nevyecha, what you're great at is facilitating other people's voice, helping their voice. So maybe you want to be someone. Well, I also have optimists. I also want to be tough and assertive. I learn from it because people watch mafia things and they don't become sociopaths. It could teach you bad midos and behavior. I admit that. But a lot of people learn, you know what, I got to be more assertive, put my foot down, have a stolz to me.
Oh, yeah, it's funny. Okay, yeah. I mean, we could use this as my my therapy session, but I love it's true. I love a good like Scorsese film, movie like a good mafia film. That could definitely do it for me. And it's funny when I walk away from those, I usually walk away happier. Like,
there you go.
All right. I don't need to be like that. I'm doing something right by not doing that, and it's interesting that you bring that up as well. But
maybe that's it. Maybe it's a more moralistic reflection that you are not doing what they're doing.
That I'm not right, and it's like a reminder. Yeah. It's so, but I think that this process is super important, and this is what I like about with the stuff you do is that it's a way of looking at the world, and the things you do are not just like, oh, I like to watch UFC, or I like to. Why do I like basketball? Why do I like halacha over medrash? Why do I only like musar?
Yes.
Or machshava?
Right.
In learning as well, when we relate to our Torah, like everyone's drawn towards different things. We think. I went to a Brisker yeshiva.
This is the most important thing that you've said today. It really touches my soul.
It wasn't the Kobe thing?
Oh, no. I can't stand Kobe. But by the way, I think Kobe's a hard nut to crack because he imitated Jordan so much. He became another person. I don't think he's Gevurah, though. I believe he's something like Chesed Yisod.
Well, it's also the craft. That was Kobe was the craft. So there's something to that. Yeah.
Crafted in Chachma of the physical.
There was, but yeah, I think that in learning and in our practice of our Judaism, we say, oh, I went to a Brisker yeshiva, or I'm a Baal Tshuva, or I never learned. So therefore, I don't like halacha, or therefore, I don't like learning.
Yeah.
But no, there's a reason why you went to Brisker yeshiva. There's a reason why. This is all you. This is part of what you, what makes you tick.
It's your individual personality. Yes, and someone could be a Baal Tshuva and like halacha more than someone who's FFB who likes Midrash and Hashkafa. And what really gets to me is that, and I talk about Tiferes people too much. I need to balance it out with other people. How many creative people have you spoken to who are traumatized from yeshiva because the Rebbe throw the eraser at them? They can't sit there like this, like a zombie for hours. Most people can't. Most people are not Netzach and adults. So that's why I like Montessori. My kids go to Montessori. I love positive discipline. So my point is that, and I put this in the book. In the 3rd chapter of the book, Milo specifically learns Midrash and Chumash with the Rebbe who's Netzach, who nurtures him and brings him back and makes him feel good, because it doesn't really matter your background. You need to do what is good for your personality. Now, yes, here's the inner critic. Maybe you still have to learn halacha. You can't avoid that. Maybe you still have to learn the parsha. But in terms of what really speaks to your soul, what you shell on, what you spend time on, it's totally fine to spend extra time or to juice to enjoy what you enjoy as a person.
Right. It's what gets you, just to clarify that, it's
right.
what gets you juiced, what gets you
That's
energized.
right.
Anything that you do too much is going to ruin you. So it's if you spend all your time, I myself, like I went through, obviously came through the yeshiva system, and as I got older, I said, there are so many, I'm drawn towards Musar and Machshava more than learning of halacha, drawn towards. And I spent time, like hours and hours and hours just going through. And at a point I said, I need Gemara. Like I need halacha now because I need to balance this out. You can't just spend, you spend 6 hours Sidarim on a Nefesh HaChaim or on a Kuzari or whatever you're making your way through, Maharals. You're going to, Maharal's a bit different, but you're going to need that analytic thought, and you're going to need that, the Gvura there, you're going to need the lots of different things at play that you're going to need as well. So it's a full diet is the Torah, but we're talking about like what you're drawn towards.
And what's so beautiful about what you said, Lebron, is that you were listening to your inner voice. And if you would have had an inner critic squashing that voice who said, no, you're a shagitz unless you learn halacha. No, you're a shagitz unless you hurt yourself on Gemara for an extra hour. You never would have heard that inner voice help balance you out. People in a healthy state are a pretty good judge of what they should be doing. Now, we can always learn something. There's always the counter argument. But that's what was so good, is that you listened to your inner voice there and didn't squash it with a perfectionist critic or whatever. I argue now, Musar has gone from self-development to shaming people and what you ought to do. I think
Tochacha and rebuke, right?
I think Musar Shmuzim would be 100 times better if 90% of them were about inner critics. I think more people in yeshiva are worried about what I should be doing, the shoulds and the oughts, we call it in therapy, rather than exactly what speaks to them as a person,
Right, finding that space. So and just getting to know yourself. I think that's what speaks. And the Torah is all about that. Everything, and this is obviously you love this this concept. This is where you come from. This is what gives you juice. Is that the Torah is there as this guidebook that's given us this pathway just to understand ourselves and understand the world we live in. So it's awesome.
Exactly, that's right. Make connections. Yeah. So somebody says, hey, I feel like a chesed, and I'm not out there screaming about Akash Baruch Hu. We'll go down there. And Abraham he made an inn, and he stayed there, and he had an orchard. So maybe your chesed is you host people a certain amount of time, and you're not running around and going poor and neglecting your kids. You feel like you're Netzach. Well, look at Moshe Rabbeinu. He's about to Nabol Tibo Gamata Gam Ha'am. Yisro says, hey, I'm Yesod. I'm the first consultant on record, and I'm telling you, if you do this too much, you will get worn out. It's not good for you. People with the Middot of Netzach have that perfectionism. They're working too much. They don't balance it. They go to the Torah, and it says, ooh, it's okay to have less perfect judgments with a hierarchy system, but it's sustainable. And that's a message for them. And, I won't say to people, hey, you're not Jewish in therapy, but look at Shemos, Shemos Chaf, but I'll say to them, I can't change your life. You need to speak to yourself to say this is not sustainable within yourself. If someone's a Christian or a Bible person, I'll say, hey, go look over there. But it's not Christian counseling. It's universal. But these are universal things. And if someone's Yesod. You are Yesod. You have incredible ideas, man. Wait. Perfect yourself. Don't tell the proverbial brothers. Wait. And that is reassuring. And Yesod, people can just watch it unfold in front of them, strike at the right time. You're Malchus. You have strong statements. If people can't hear you, Evan Ma'asu Habonim Haisadosh Pina. The people dislike your roughness. They're going to need you one day. Wait for that time to strike when the iron is hot. Aaron Cohen, are you helping people to do Avodah Zarah, but you're being nice about it? Or are you saying no to them? So the quintessential advice is there in the Chumash, and of course in the Musar Sforim and other things.
Terrific. So let's run through a couple plugs here. But so if you, it's impossible that you didn't. But if you enjoyed Rabbi Ian and his awesome thoughts, so then obviously you could start with the book. And where can we get that? 7 ways.
It's on demand on Amazon.
Amazon, baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Easy buy, easy read, awesome read.
It's on digital on Kindle as well. And the podcast is the 7 Ways podcast.
So wait, you
Go
mentioned
ahead.
before we got on, you mentioned that this is the 10 years. 10 years.
This is the 10-year anniversary of when
the
the book
book.
was published, and your brother was the first one to buy a copy, sitting here at our favorite Chinese at David Chu's over here. And then right around now in June, 14 years ago, I developed a system. It's my Hebrew birthday tonight. Hebrew birthday. This is a epic time. This is hashgacha. I mean, this is amazing that you're here and we're doing this. It makes me so happy. I'm sitting in an apartment in Jerusalem, just thinking these things up, hoping to share them with people one day to empower them and to make them feel easier on themselves, to be yourself. This is like part of my fruition of my dream, so it's very exciting to me.
Amazing. And Rabbi Ian,
Yeah.
this is how I came back around to him, is he started a podcast as well. So if you're an audio guy or girl and a woman and you like to listen to that, so then you can find it. I think it's 2 separate podcasts.
It's on at least
right?
8 platforms. Yes, I have three seasons, and there's 2 different podcasts. So the 7 Ways podcast has all 49 of the Sefirot explained, and as much as I could do during this time, both in terms of abstract concepts and practical advice. Season 2.
So really breaking over what, like when you gave the short, brief version tonight. So that's going through all those pieces and explaining them.
Gevurah, everything.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Season 2, only 1 pod right now, but it's going to be Chomesh and Chagim and everything. It's a nice message in that one. And then season 3 is a series I'm working on. I call it Downstream from Religion. It's on Shvatim, and my daughter wanted to learn Shvatim last summer, and I looked in there. It blew me away how it relates to today in our times. It's unbelievable what we're dealing with in society. It's unbelievable what we're dealing with in society, and that's season 3. And then there's a non-Jewish general audience version of that called Downstream from Religion, purely on different platforms. But the season 3 with a different logo, Downstream from Religion podcast, is for the Jewish audience over there, going through 2 introductions, preparation of the book, including Sefirot, and why would anyone do Avodah Zarah, intro 2, and then I get into all the different procurement things.
So I'll link to the books. I'll link
Sure,
to the podcast, the book, and I'll link to the podcasts, all the different ones also in the show notes. So it's very easy to find them.
Yeah.
And it's worthwhile. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rabbi Ian.
I appreciate being here. It's very exciting.
Us.
And I want to thank you because, I have been holding things inside of me for 10 years, literally. I had to stop blogging. I've been busy. And podcasting has enabled me to get my voice out there. And I feel so fulfilled putting things out there. So I appreciate you facilitating that and help me to be myself and to inspire others.
Amazing.